It's episode 5 of Vinny makes the Hall of Fame case for ... Vinny, who's it for?
Here's a guy that I've never seen a single person ever make a case for.
Me included.
And this person, this is the first time anyone, in my opinion, I don't think anyone has made a case for it. Kirk, have you seen anyone make a case for this person?
No, I didn't even know who it was until you told me who we were doing a show on. I've never heard of this guy.
He doesn't even have his own Wikipedia article. My boss, who was from Oakland through and through, has never even heard of him. So it makes me really wonder, who is him? So I did a little digging.
Okay, well, hold on. What's the name so that people know who we're talking about?
The man's name is Wilfred Winkenbach, but better known by his friends as Bill Winkenbach.
That doesn't help us. Who's Bill? Who is this guy?
If it wasn't for Bill Winkenbach, you would have never had fantasy football.
All right, cool. All right, so how did this start? How did he create fantasy football?
Well, before you do that, you got to start with how he was big into fantasy itself. Back in the 1950s, he even created fantasy golf. So this is a man that was very, very big in terms of creating just fantasy sports in terms of a whole. This guy was a pioneer of it. But then one day, he was also a minority owner in the Raiders, as you mentioned. So one day, he was with a few of his friends.
When was this, if you don't mind me asking? Sorry to interrupt.
It was 1960. It was 1962 in a hotel room in Oakland, California.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided in a hotel room in New York City with a cross-country trip, and some of his friends, some of the employees said, "Hey, I want to start fantasy football." And this is an idea that he had. And with a couple of his friends, just decided to draw the rules. And those same rules that applied then are the same rules for the most part that applied now. Point spreads, importance for running backs, as well as, the actual value for each person. Everything was started by him in that hotel room. And as a result, he decided back home to create the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Procrastinators League, or GOPL.
I'm sorry. Okay, say that again, there, Vin.
The full thing.
Yeah.
The league that he created was called the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Procrastinators League. GOPL, GOPPL.
Okay.
I know it sounds a little crazy,
wow.
But
right. No, awesome. I didn't know that. Yeah, go on.
And so the league, what he decided would be something that would consist of 8 members, including himself, with, journalists of that area, the Raiders, as well as also affiliates for the American Football League. And each roster, this was the rule that it had. Each roster consisted of, it said 2 quarterbacks, 4 halfbacks, means running backs usually. Then also 2 fullbacks as well, 4 wide receivers or tight ends, either one, as well as 2 kicker punt returners, 2 kickers, 2 defensive backs or linebackers, and then 2 defensive linemen. And the scoring system that he did was based on real life scoring. Like if they scored a point, if you threw a touchdown pass or a run, it was 25 points. If there's a field goal, also 25 points. If you get an extra point, it's 10 points. And then if you do a kickoff, that's 200, as well as a punt or an interception that was returned for a touchdown. And as of today, it still is around, and it still maintains that same exact scoring system.
So how did it get from that point in the early 60s to something that blossomed to to what it is today, like almost a $1 billion enterprise. It's probably bigger than most sports.
Well, the way it happened was that one of his friends, one of the other people that he founded it with, Andy Musolinis, decided to bring it to a sports bar. And the name of the sports bar was called King's X. And he decided, hey, we're going to do a public fantasy league as well. And this spread
When did
throughout
this
word
happen,
of mouth.
Vinny? When did that happen?
1969.
Okay.
Just a few years after the official Goppel was founded in August of 1963. And because of what he did, because of everything, because of Goppel's imprint, as well as it being going public, everyone started doing it. They decided, hey, we love this idea. Let's make our own leagues. 1980, in the Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, also founded the Indoor Football League, which is also another very old fantasy football league, and decided to form a league after reading the article on that. And it went throughout. A lot of those leagues that started it are still a part of it, and just went further and further and further and further. And as a result, this led to 1997, where CBS started their own fantasy football. And then as a result, it quickly followed suit. Then shortly after, Yahoo started their own free competition. And because of just the demand, it only kept growing and growing and growing and growing. The NFL decided to make their own in 2010, which gave a lot of money for the NFL and gave more interest in the NFL. As of now, we have over 60 million people in the US and Canada that play fantasy football. And they estimate from the Fantasy Sports and Gambling Association that around 4 to 5 fantasy participants played fantasy football.
Okay.
And
so as this sort of went on, what was Bill's role in this progression? Or was there one?
Bill's role was that he was someone that helped continue to spread the importance of fantasy football. So really big cheerleader. He was the one that was trying to give it to other demographics all throughout the entire Oakland area. Also, he's not an investor anymore. He got rid of that not too long afterwards.
Is Bill still alive, Vinny?
No, he died in 1993 at the age of 81. He there isn't as much information about him, but he's just responsible for everything. If it was not for what Bill Winkenbach did on that day in that New York City hotel room, fantasy football would have never been a thing, and the league would have not profited off billions of dollars as a result. What he did, the impact that he left behind, is more than many other sports leagues. Fantasy football is something that everyone knows. FX did an entire show called The League that was centered around fantasy football. All this stuff is responsible for one man. Everything.
Okay. So here's where it gets sort of tricky. As you and I both know, the Pro Football Hall of Fame it's very, very hard to get into. You did a great job discussing some of the other contributors. So here we have somebody who's contributing in a way that is financially relevant, but not football relevant.
I would argue it actually is football relevant.
Okay, good. Please.
As much as people want to say otherwise, sports is a business. Professional football is a business. The NFL is a business. The NFL will do whatever they can to maximize their profits to make sure the game itself grows throughout. And a big way to get people on board to watching your product is by fantasy football. Fantasy football is a big reason why the league itself is still doing well to this day. And it's obviously doing well, but a big reason for that, why that is the case, the last 30 years, of course, is because of fantasy football. Fantasy football led to gambling. All the
Well,
sports.
whoa. Gambling, I think, would have
No.
happened.
Let me finish. Sports gambling, that was something that was legalized in many cases. A lot of cases in a lot of states, and a big reason why that was the case was because of the spread of fantasy sports, in particular fantasy football. And now you're seeing with the NFL, they're now partnering with places like Caesars. Like Caesars now has their name on the Superdome, for God's sakes. Like, I know I'm like kind of
True. Yep.
Yeah, all the stuff ties back to Winkenbach for what he did. If he did not do this, none of this would have happened. Something wrong?
Nah, I don't know. Okay, so here's my take. I mean, like I've loved everything that we've done. I've been 1,000% aboard on every one of the ones you've pushed. For this particular one, it's, in my opinion, it's a little tricky, as we've got. Okay, I do agree that fantasy football has helped pro football. It absolutely has. I play fantasy football. I wish I didn't. I do it because it keeps me in touch with a lot of my ex-coworkers.
That, and also is generate billions of dollars to the leagues and many of these companies.
Sure.
And also, yes.
Sure, it definitely does. Yet, where do we put this in terms of contributors? Because, like, as you've said many times, and you're the contributor king.
Yes, I am the contributor king.
You are. Like you look at, you're an outside of the box thinker, and I love that about you. Which is why we're having this conversation now. But like, where do you put him in terms of referees, coaches, assistant coaches? It's a real hard pitch.
It is a very difficult pitch, and I'm not arguing with you at all, considering that, like I said, this guy doesn't even have his own Wikipedia article. You really got to dig deep into the, dig deep into the gutters in order to find a little information about him.
Right.
Well, that's why I like him. But that's also a big reason why I like it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
The big reason why I like a lot of these guys, because barely anyone does any reports on them. I mean, they're not the sexy player. They're not the they're not that hot quarterback. They're not like, they're not even the lonely kicker. They are the guy that never put on pads, but he also did partially own the Raiders. That's one thing. He also helped grow the AFL as a result, because it was all throughout people within AFL circles. It also, honestly, I would argue that it probably is bigger than like even some referees, even because while I want to see referees very badly, and as you know,
I do.
But what did one referee do for the game compared to what one person did? That one referee did not give the league billions of dollars in revenue.
All right. Okay, fair point. But at the same time, though, pro football, as much as they're entwined with gambling, tries not to be entwined with gambling. You and I both have talked about Alex Karras.
Yeah.
And he did get into the Hall of Fame 30, 20 years later than he should have.
That guy should have been in one of the first 5 ballots. That's how good he was.
Right. So now we have a guy who indirectly, it's a gambling thing.
Yeah.
How does that help him or hurt him? Because I would say, like, I'm going to say that he's just never going to be on the radar.
Fair enough. For now.
Okay.
For now. See, the thing is, like, reason why a Pete person like a Winkenbach doesn't really register in many people's eyes is because I think way too many have a narrow idea of what it means to truly be on that level of a pantheon. I would say that, it's a big reason why I always look up to like inventors, for instance. I mean, if John Riddell, and I'll get to him later down the line, if he didn't invent the plastic helmet, where would the NFL be today?
Well, some would argue more safer.
If there,
we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah,
I'll get there.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole.
But at the same time, if there was no fantasy football, what position financially would the league be in?
I don't know, but there was like 3-4 people I wouldn't talk to as much.
Growing up, like my dad always had his fantasy football leagues with Yahoo and CBS, and he did this back in like the early 2000s. So I'm really, I've known this stuff for a long time.
So Vin, do you play fantasy football? Are you in the league?
I have a lot of things going on.
That's an easy question.
Nah, I'm not. But at the same time, that's also fine. Like, I don't need to be a part of fantasy football to know.
Of course you don't. I'm in one just to keep in touch with people, my ex-coworkers. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in.
Yeah, my dad does that too, actually. Like, he only talks with these guys because of fantasy football.
Yeah. No, and this has been a real interesting one. I'm not nearly as passionate about this one as the others that you've presented, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, I want people to like be kind of hesitant, because at the same time, I'm not expecting people to be as passionate for Winkenbach. Most people don't know who he is.
I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't know who he was.
Like I said before, my boss, who is from Oakland, California, and knows everything about Oakland, California, he doesn't even know about this guy. And if he doesn't know about him, then most people probably don't know about him.
All right, so let me throw this at you. So just as somebody who focuses on the Hall of Fames and whatnot, the toy Hall of Fame, the game Hall of Fame.
Love them. Mascot Hall of Fame.
Mascot Hall of Fame, but okay, but like the toy Hall of Fame, like from the Strong Museum in Rochester. How about for this?
What do you mean?
No, fantasy football being for the toy Hall of Fame.
It's an idea I've thought of, but you know, that also is very liberal in the idea of what a toy is. I mean, the Radio Flyer Wagon is inducted. Tic-Tac-Toe has been nominated.
Sand has been nominated.
Sand?
I think so.
Sand? Is sand a toy?
Well, chalk. I could be wrong.
I wouldn't. Listen, from what I know with the Toy Hall of Fame, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Yeah.
You know, but play stand is a very well-known thing that people play with.
Like, why not this for that? I mean, it kind of fits, no?
It fits, but I have another question.
Go ahead.
Like that famous meme. Why not both?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's something that I know that a lot of people don't really like, mention, but a lot of these small little things that even though they may not affect the game, it also does affect the game. A big reason why Jerry Jones, for instance, made the Hall of Fame is, yes, I understand he won 3 Super Bowls.
Sorry, big reason made the Hall of Fame? Oh, made it to the Hall of Fame. Sorry.
Big reason why Jerry Jones made it to the Hall of Fame is not really because of the 3 Super Bowls. The number one reason why he made the Hall of Fame is because he is the reason why the NFL stayed on top exceptionally well in the last 30 years, and also with the brand sponsors that help grow the game throughout and to market more and for commercials. That alone that's the main reason why he's in the Hall of Fame. And similarly, I would argue that Winkenbach creating fantasy football, I mean, how many people watch football just because of fantasy football? There are people that don't know anything about football that follow it because of fantasy football, and this has helped grow the game. This helped get more eyeballs. This has met people become more fans, and for all we know, it's probably let also many other people decide to become players in themselves. Granted, there's not really any details of people that become professional football players because of fantasy football, though comparatively we have had instances of people becoming coaches because of Madden, for instance. But at the same time, it definitely did increase. You have whole shows on NFL Network about fantasy football. You have people that sign jobs like Matt Money Smith and many others to become a part of it because of fantasy sports. And that has been so ingrained with the sport itself. It's almost as big as it. And then none of that stuff would have happened if it wasn't for Wilfred Wilkenbach.
All right, fair enough. Any last words on Mr. Wilkenbach?
I would say if anyone thinks this is going to be the only one of these people that are out of the box, weird, and just things that no one thought of becoming it. And no, it's not because of low standards. It's quite the opposite. This guy's rated league has generated billions of dollars. In fact, the fantasy football industry. Kirk, do you want to know how much do you think the fantasy football industry is worth?
Oh God. 3 billion?
22 billion.
Per year?
Yes. At least.
Way more than I thought, obviously.
22 billion. This man is responsible for the league making $22 billion.
Okay, but does the league make 22 billion off that, or just the whole thing made 22
professional
billion?
Football itself? What this man did, this is what he did. This is his legacy, $22 billion per year. Is that good enough? That's what I say. When he's responsible for generating that much money and that much interest into the sport, I think that's a Hall of Famer, shadow of a doubt, no questions asked.
Okay, let me close off with this. Because I don't know the answer to this. Was fantasy football the predecessor to fantasy baseball, fantasy hockey, fantasy basketball?
Fantasy football was something that came, you see, Wilkenbach was a person that, like I said, he started out with fantasy golf. You've seen fantasy sports over the years. Even like fantasy football goes back to like the 19th century. I think in 1866 was when fantasy baseball started. But Wilkenbach was one that invented fantasy football. There was fantasy sports for other ones, but he decided, hey, here's an idea. Why don't you be the one that invents it for fantasy football?
But ahead of like fantasy baseball and the other stuff as well.
No, fantasy baseball goes back further, but fantasy football started in 1962 because of this one man. And as a result, his legacy is $22 billion for the whole sport.
All right, fair enough. Okay, cool.
What? So do you think I swayed you in any way?
No.
Don't worry, it's fine.
No. Well, you put him on my radar, but in terms of who needs to look at for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he's now there.
Hey, as long as he's on someone's radar, as long as he's on like, hey, there's this guy. As long as I have that, I'm at least very happy. Because before there were 0 people.
Well, yeah. Well, I barely count as 0. But anyway. Vinny, thanks so much. I can't wait to see you guys have come back for next week or next 2 weeks. Whenever we do this again. All good. Thank you all and stay safe, everybody.